My brother stole our family business and told me I was finished, so I built something he couldn't touch. I watched my brother change the locks on the building our dad built, then hang a sign on the door that said, "Staff only, no family discounts." My 8-year-old daughter squeezed my hand and asked Dad, "Why is Uncle's diner closed for us but open for everybody else?" I didn't know how to tell her that my own brother had thrown us out of the family business and told me I was finished. My name's Daniel Ruiz, but in our neighborhood everyone used to call me Danny from Rafa's. Rafa's Corner Grill was my father's place. A squat brick diner at the end of a strip of tired shops, an auto shop, a laundromat, and a barber hood. Been cutting the same fades for 30 years. Dad Raphael opened the grill the year my mom left. It started with 4 wobbly booths, a grill that smoked too much, and a chalkboard menu. He ran it like a church. If someone came in hungry and short on cash, he fed them anyway. He knew every regular's order and how they liked their eggs. He'd tuck $5 bills into dishwashers' hands at Christmas so they could buy their kids something nice. He taught both his sons to cook. My older brother Damien gravitated to the numbers and the front of house. He liked the idea of being the boss. He'd stand at the register talking about profit margins, menu pricing, and our brand. I gravitated to the grill. Dad would wake me up at 4 in the morning on Saturdays. We'd drive in while the streetlights were still buzzing and he'd show me how to marinate the carne asada so the lime soaked all the way into the meat. How to toast cumin and oregano in a dry pan before grinding them so the smell hits people on the sidewalk before they see the sign. "I'm not just teaching you recipes," he'd say. "I'm teaching you how to feed people so they feel like they matter." The plan was always simple. Damien and I would inherit the grill together. He'd handle the books and business deals. I'd run the kitchen and train staff. Clara, our little sister, would manage front of house and eventually open a second location. That's what Dad told anyone who asked. Rafa's his family he'd say. "My kids will run it when I'm too old to hold a spatula." Then Dad got sick. It started with fatigue, then weight loss, then the word I still hate saying out loud, cancer. The last year of his life, our world shrank to hospital visits, chemo schedules, and watching this big, loud man turn into something small and fragile. I was the one who took time off to sit with him during treatments. I'd bring him broth from the grill, pretend it was one of his own recipes so he'd eat more. We'd talk about seasoning and suppliers instead of tumors. Damien came to the hospital too, but less often. He said the restaurant needed him. He started taking more meetings, talking about modernizing and rebranding, while Dad still slept with the original logo on his ball cap. One night, Dad grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "I want you to have the recipes, Danny," he said. "All of them. Not just the food. The way we run the place. The way we treat people. Promise me you'll keep that." "I promise," I said, my throat tight. "Well, run it together. Me and Damien, like you always said." He closed his eyes, satisfied. I didn't know that while I was sitting there holding his hand, Damien was sitting in some lawyer's office clarifying the estate. I didn't know that clarifying meant convincing our father to sign papers he barely understood, saying Damien would be the sole owner and operator for the good of the business since I was too distracted by art and side gigs to commit. It wasn't until after the funeral that I learned the truth. The lawyer read the will in a small conference room that smelled like stale coffee and printer ink. To my sister Clara, a small savings account and Dad's old car. To me, my personal belongings, including notebooks and tools. To Damien, the grill, the building, the business name. "I don't understand," I said. "That's supposed to be split." Damien didn't look at me. He just tapped the paper with a perfectly manicured fingernail. "Dad and I talked," he said. "He knew you never took this seriously enough. You're always sketching, taking photos, talking about starting a YouTube channel or a niche food blog. You're not a businessman, Danny. This place needs a businessman." I opened my mouth to argue, but the words died on my tongue. Because the will was signed, because Dad's name was on it, because he wasn't there to correct it, I clung to one hope. Maybe it was just paperwork. Maybe in practice we'd still work together. That hope died 3 weeks later on a Tuesday. I showed up with my daughter Sophia, 8 years old, hair in 2 tight braids, thinking we'd grab dinner and celebrate our first day back. Damien stepped in front of the door, blocking us with his body. "This is a workplace, not a charity," he said quietly. "We can't have you hanging around confusing the staff. Customers need a single message." "I'm not hanging around," I said. "I'm your brother. I trained half the kitchen." "Exactly," he replied. "Your family. Which means people will expect handouts and discounts if they see you eating here. We can't afford that. This is a business now, Danny. Not Dad's little church." He looked down at Sophia, then back at me. "If you want to eat, there's a fast food place down the street." Someone inside laughed at something a server said. A waitress walked past with 2 plates of Dad's signature green chili burgers. I stood on the sidewalk and realized I had just been exiled from my own family's legacy. The only job I could get quickly enough to keep us afloat was across the same strip mall, the laundromat. For 3 years, I folded strangers' clothes while looking out through the plate glass, watching Damien's version of Rafa's swell with customers. From my little stool by the window, I watched cousins I grew up with run food to tables. I watched my nephews learn how to stack dishes. I watched our sister Clara at the register, eyes tired but smiles practiced. If I opened the laundromat door, I could smell the grilled onions and spices from across the cracked asphalt. "Dad, can we eat at Uncle's diner on the way home?" Sophia would ask, nose wrinkling as the smell drifted in. "It smells like Grandpa." I'd swallow the lump in my throat and lie. "Not tonight, mi amor. We don't have the budget for that place." The truth was uglier. We did have the budget for dinner once in a while, but I refused to pay my brother to sit in my father's booth and pretend I was a customer, so I microwaved leftovers at home instead. Damien didn't just lock me out of the building. He locked me out of the story. He changed the menu but kept Dad's name and logo. He flirted with food bloggers, put up an Instagram page showing burgers I'd designed without ever crediting where they came from. He boasted about keeping Dad's dream alive in interviews while I folded towels under flickering fluorescent lights. More than once, I started to walk across that asphalt to confront him, then stopped. What would I say? Give me back what a signed will says you own? Admit you lied to a dying man who trusted you. It'd go back to my stacks of laundry and tell myself it wasn't worth the fight. Then 4 months before everything changed, I ran into Mr. Delgado. He used to deliver produce to Rafa's twice a week. A quiet man with sunburned cheeks and hands, permanently stained green from handling lettuce and herbs. Now he was retired, wearing a faded ball cap and comparing prices on canned beans in the bargain store down the block. "Danny," he said, squinting at me. "I almost didn't recognize you without the apron." We hugged awkwardly between aisles of cheap cereal. "Whatever happened to your breakfast quesadillas?" he said. "Your eggs always came out better than your brother's." "Don't tell him I said that." I laughed, but it came out bitter. "Hard to cook when you're banned from the kitchen." His expression darkened. "I heard," he said quietly, "about the will, about Damien." He glanced around, then leaned closer. "My nephew runs a small commissary kitchen now," he said. "Food truck hub. Shared refrigerators, prep tables, and overnight storage. They've got one spot open, no deposit, month-to-month rent, if you're interested." "With what money?" I asked. "I make $12 an hour. I've got $80 in my checking account." "I don't have a truck, Mr. Delgado. I have a Corolla with a dent." He studied me for a moment, eyes thoughtful. "Your father shook my hand 20 years ago and said, 'I'll pay you when I can,'" he said. "No contract. Everyone told me I was crazy, but he kept his word. He helped me grow my root." He took a card from his wallet and pressed it into my palm. "Now it's my turn," he said. "You pay me when you can. Rent, produce, whatever. You have your dad's hands. It's a shame to waste them on other people's laundry." Sophia tugged on my sleeve. "Dad," she whispered, "can you make those cheesy breakfast things you used to make for Grandpa? The ones with the crispy tortilla edges?" Her eyes were so hopeful that something in me cracked. That night after I put Sophia to bed, I pulled down the box Damien had handed me right after the funeral. "Dad wanted you to have his notebook's head," said, not meeting my eyes. "I kept the important stuff at the restaurant." Back then, I'd shoved the box in a closet. Seeing Dad's handwriting was like picking at a fresh wound. Now I opened it. Inside, under a stack of old invoices and photos, was the notebook. A battered, grease-stained composition book. The spine was cracked, pages swollen from years of splatters. Each page was a piece of my childhood. Saturday chilaquiles. Add leftover salsa, don't waste. Marinade for flank steak. Don't let Damien convince you to switch to bottled. Hess wrong. How to stretch a pot of beans when 5 extra kids show up for dinner. In between the recipes were notes in his looping handwriting. "People remember how you made them feel more than what was on the plate. Never yell at a dishwasher. You'll regret it. Teach Danny how to read the line. Don't just teach him the stove." By the time I hit the last page, my chest hurt from missing him. But under all that grief, there was something else. A map. Not just of dishes. Of how to build something from nothing. I sat at my tiny kitchen table and started doing math on the back of an old envelope. How much could I scrape together from my tax refund and what little savings I had left? How much did a used hot plate cost? A portable griddle? Could I start with a cart instead of a full truck? By sunrise, I had a plan scribbled in pencil and circles. Start small. No menu bloat. One signature dish. One good coffee. Everything else could grow later. A week later, I signed a lease on a corner of the commissary kitchen. It wasn't glamorous. Cement floor, stainless steel tables, fluorescent lights, a row of refrigerators humming like bored bees. But to me, it was freedom. Mr. Delgado's nephew Luis slid the lease across the table. "No deposit," he said, as his uncle promised. "You just pay month to month. Don't make me chase you." "You won't have to," I replied. The first thing I bought was not even equipment, it was paint. I found an old hot dog cart for $900 on an online classifieds page, all rust and peeling vinyl. I spent 2 weekends sanding it down and painting it a bright, ridiculous turquoise. It looks like a summer sky, Sophia declared, dabbing a streak on her cheek by accident. That's the point, I said, so people can see us from far away. We stenciled Danny's morning fix on the side in white. Underneath in smaller letters, honest breakfast, real coffee. I had $500 left after paying for the cart and basic permits. So I started with what I knew, breakfast burritos with Dad's chorizo recipe, simple chilaquiles with salsa roja, strong coffee brewed in a battered silver pot. I wheeled the cart to my first spot at 5:30 a.m., the construction site 3 blocks from Damien's Grill. The foreman Marco did a double take when he saw me. "Danny, from Rafa's?" he said. "Not anymore," I replied, forcing a smile. "Now I'm Danny from the turquoise cart. Want a burrito?" He bought one, took one bite, stopped. "This tastes like your dad's," he said. "Actually better." "Don't tell him I said that. Hez not around to yell about it," I said quietly. By 8 o'clock, word had spread through the site. Guys who remembered Dad came by out of curiosity. New workers followed their noses. By week 2, nurses from the medical center down the road started showing up at the end of night shifts, scrubs flecked with God knows what, eyes half closed, clutching coffee like a lifeline. "This beats the vending machine," one of them muttered, taking a long sip. By week 3, office workers from the nearby insurance company started phone ordering for their whole floor. I was waking up at 3:30 to prep chorizo and eggs in the commissary so I could be at my first stop by 6. While I cooked, Sophia did her homework at a little fold-out table wedged into the corner. Sometimes she'd run outside to hand change to customers. "Dad, Mrs. Carter doesn't like onions shed," remind me. "And Mr. Lee likes extra crispy tortilla." She was turning into my father without even realizing it. The first time I realized my cart was hurting Damien's business was a Tuesday afternoon about 2 months in. I pulled into the lot of the tire shop at noon, my designated lunch spot. Across the cracked asphalt, I could see Rafa's front windows. Before, there had always been a line out the door around lunchtime. People crowded under the faded awning, craning their necks to see the host stand. Now the line was gone. A few tables were full, but most of the stools at the counter were empty. Meanwhile, there was a small crowd forming around my turquoise cart. Guys in greasy jumpsuits. A school teacher is still wearing her lanyard, the vet tech from the clinic at the end of the block. They stood in the sun, chatting, waiting for my burritos and grilled sandwiches. "These taste like your dad's food before your brother started cutting everything with cheap filler," the tire shop owner, Ray, said, licking salsa off his thumb. "You're charging half what he is too." I shrugged, but his words lodged somewhere deep. That night Clara showed up. She stepped up to the cart in her work, polo eyes ringed with fatigue. "Damien says we need to talk," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. I handed her a foil-wrapped burrito without asking. "No cilantro," I said. "Extra salsa. You always hated cilantro." She held it but didn't unwrap it. "He says you're being unfair," she continued. "Stealing customers, confusing people. Dad would have wanted us to support each other, not compete." I barked out a bitter laugh. "Did he say that before or after he changed the locks while Dad was in chemo?" I asked. Her jaw tightened. "You don't know what those weeks were like," she said. He was scared. We all were. The restaurant nearly went under. I was there, I reminded her. Just not in the meetings where he convinced Dad I was too flighty to trust. The customers I had left glanced over awkwardly. I lowered my voice. "Tell Damien this," I said. "I don't push anyone to eat here. People choose. If they miss Dad's food, they know where to find it." She stared at me for a long moment, then finally unwrapped the burrito and took a bite. Tears sprang to her eyes, but she blinked them back. "Damn it," she muttered. "You made it exactly like he did." "Tell Damien," I repeated, turning back to the grill, "that I take cash and cards." She didn't deliver his reply in words. He showed up 3 days later. It was a Sunday evening. I was closing up at my last spot, a little park where dog walkers and young couples grabbed food on their way home. Damien pulled up in a gleaming black SUV with the new restaurant logo plastered on the side. The logo Dad had drawn on a napkin, now stylized and modern. He stepped out in a tailored shirt and designer shoes that had never seen grease. "We need to talk," he said, folding his arms. "We are talking," I replied, wiping down the grill. "You're confusing the market," he continued. "People think your cart is some kind of extension of my brand. Then they see your prices and think we're overcharging." "You are overcharging," I said calmly. $18 for a burger with half the seasoning and frozen fries? Come on, man." His face flushed. "You're disrespecting Dad's work." "I'm respecting it exactly," I said. "You're the one who switched to canned beans, bottled salsa, and frozen patties to save on labor. People notice." He stepped closer, using his height like he did when we were kids, certain he could intimidate me. "I'm willing to make you a deal," he said. "Close this thing down. Come work for me as a line cook. It'll pay you $2,500 a month under the table plus staff meals. You get a steady income. We stop cannibalizing the same niche." I almost laughed in his face. I was already making more than that, even after expenses. More importantly, that cart was mine. "No," I said, simply. He blinked. "You didn't even think about it." "I've been thinking about it since the day you shut the door in Sophia's face," I replied. "The answer is still no." His jaw clenched. "Fine," he said. "Then I guess you'll just have to let the city know about your little operation. I have friends in the permits office. People who care about health codes and zoning. It'd be a shame if someone got sick from your food." The threat landed hard. I knew he wasn't bluffing. Had gone nuclear before. I kept my face neutral. "My permits are valid," I said. "My inspections are up to date. But if you feel like calling the city, go ahead. Just make sure your own kitchen is spotless first." We stared at each other in the sodium yellow glow of the streetlights. Then he turned, got into his SUV and sped off, tires screeching slightly. My hands shook as I finished closing. That night, after Sophia fell asleep, I pulled out a battered cardboard box full of folders and spread everything on the table. Business license, food handler's certification, health inspection report with a perfect score from 5 weeks ago, copy of my agreement with Luis for commissary space, parking permission letter from Ray, the tire shop owner. I made copies of everything, stuffed the originals into a fireproof box E'd bought with my first good week of sales, scanned the documents and emailed them to myself and to an empty Gmail address ID made just for backups. If Damien wanted a warhead, picked the wrong little brother this time. The inspector showed up the next morning. She was in a city, polo hair, pulled back, tight clipboard in hand. "Hi," she said, offering a faintly apologetic smile. "We received a complaint about your cart. Anonymous, of course. Says you're operating without proper refrigeration and serving undercooked food." Construction workers in line groaned. "Somebody's scared you're stealing his customers," Marco muttered. "Let her do her job," I told them quietly. For nearly an hour, the inspector checked everything. She poked a thermometer into pans of chorizo and beans, checked the temp on my cooler, watched me wash my hands, change gloves, and separate raw ingredients from cooked. She even tasted the salsa. "That's really good," she said under her breath. "Family recipe," I replied. Finally, she clicked her pen closed. "Everything looks great," she said. "Honestly, cleaner and more organized than half the brick-and-mortar places I inspect." She lowered her voice slightly. "Off the record, this smells like harassment. Document any other complaints that pop up. If it escalates, you might have grounds for a legal case." "Thank you," I said. I turned back to my backed-up line and worked through them, one by one, adrenaline humming under my skin. Within 24 hours of threatening to call the city, Damien had made his first move. It wouldn't be his last. That afternoon, between the lunch rush and my shift at the park, I called Mr. Delgado. He listened quietly as I told him about the inspection, about Damien's threats, about my fear that the next move might be nastier. "I have a friend," he said once I finished. "Small business lawyer. Name's Angela Chen. She helped my nephew when the city tried to shut the commissary down over a parking complaint. First consult is free. I'll text you her number." Angela examined my paperwork with the same focus the health inspector had. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair. "You're more organized than half my clients," she said. "Permits are clean. Inspections are spotless. Agreements are in writing. If your brother tries to get cute with zoning or health codes, he's going to hit a wall." She slid a notebook across the table. "I want you to keep a log," she said. "Every interaction with him. Dates, times, what was said, and who else was there. Screenshots, if he texts. If he keeps this up, we're going to talk about a restraining order and maybe a claim for intentional interference with business relations." Business relations. I repeated the legal term, tasting strange in my mouth. "You're not just some guy with a cart," she said. "You're a business owner. Start acting like one." I nodded slowly. On my way back to the commissary, I stopped at a red light and looked over at Rafa's. Through the front window, I could see Damien pacing near the bar, phone pressed to his ear, forehead furrowed. For the first time in years, instead of feeling small, I felt dot level. He had his building. But I had my father's trust his recipes in the neighborhood. That was worth more than he had realized. The next time the war escalated, it wasn't the city. It was Clara. She showed up again at my cart, this time at the tire shop, but she looked different. The tiredness around her eyes had hardened into something else. Anger. "Can we talk?" she asked, hovering off to the side while I worked through a line of mechanics and office workers. When the rush died down, I stepped back. "You were right," she said without preamble. "About the cutting corners. About Damien." She twisted her lanyard around her fingers, eyes darting around like she was afraid someone from the restaurant would see her there. I've been handling the books, she continued, has been skimming, setting up fake vendor accounts, paying himself consulting fees, writing off his car and watches as business expenses. We're short on cash, and he keeps telling everyone it's because of competition from you. I swallowed hard. How much? I asked. She stared down at the cracked asphalt. 35, maybe 40,000 over 2 years, she said. Maybe more once the accountant finishes going through it. I let out a low whistle. He doesn't just cut corners, she said, hollowing the whole thing out from the inside. She pulled out her phone and flicked through pictures. Screenshots of expense reports, invoices from a supplier registered at Damien's home, address receipts for luxury purchases charged to the restaurant card. Why are you telling me this? I asked. You still work for him? Because I can't swallow it anymore, she whispered. This isn't Dad's place anymore. It's something else. And I can feel it crashing. She took a deep breath. You remember Mark Lewis? She asked. Dad's original investor? The guy who helped him buy the building 20 years ago? Of course I remembered him, the quiet man in the corner booth always eating the Thursday special with a small notebook open. He and his wife still own 40% of the business, Clara said. Damien's been feeding them polished quarterly reports. They think everything is fine. If they knew the quality had dropped and he was skimming, she trailed off. I don't know what I'm asking you to do, she admitted. But I know you're the only one who still cares about this place the way Dad did. That night, after Sophia went to bed, I stared at Mark's name and number in the old employee directory Clara had sent me. I thought about minding my own business. Then I thought about Dad sitting in that hospital bed telling me to remember the line, not just the recipes. I dialed. His wife Rebecca picked up. Mark's out of town for work, she said, after I stumbled through a clumsy introduction. But I handled the restaurants, finances. What's this about? I hesitated, then plunged in. I think you and Mark need to see how it's really being run, I said. Quality costs all of it, and I don't think you're getting the full picture. There was a long silence. Meet me tomorrow, she said finally. 2 o'clock. Coffee shop on Maple, 2 blocks from the grill. Bring whatever you have. Rebecca showed up in a tailored blazer, and Flat's hair pulled back a leather folder under her arm. She shook my hand, sat down, and flipped open a notebook. Talk, she said. I did. I told her about frozen patties replacing the hand-formed ones, canned beans instead of simmered pots, bottled salsa sold as house-made, price hikes without quality, staff turnover. I laid Dad's grease-stained notebook on the table next to printouts of Damien's current menu and photos of the smaller portions customers had shown me. She took notes asking specific questions. When did you notice the change to frozen fries? How long does it really take to prep those chilaquiles? What was the pricing like under your father? Then she asked the questions that mattered more to her world. Have you seen any unusual deliveries? Any trucks that don't match up with the listed vendors? When I told her about the shell vendor, Clara had discovered the one registered to Damien's address. Her eyes went cold. Thank you, she said when I finished. You've given me enough to start an audit. If you're wrong, well, find out. If you're right, things are going to change. 3 days later, Clara called me from outside the restaurant, voice low and urgent. Rebecca walked in and asked Damien for 3 years of financials, she whispered. He tried to stall. She reminded him she controls 40% of this place and sat down to wait. An outside accountant came an hour later. I've never seen him so rattled. 2 days after that, Rebecca called me. We found it, she said. Shell vendors, personal expenses, unreported cash. About 37,000 diverted in under 2 years. And that's me being generous. Her voice shook, not with fear, but fury. Hez not just a bad manager, she said. Hez a thief. Mark is on his way back. We're removing him from control. I hung up feeling strange. Vindicated, yes, but also sad. Damien had stood beside me at the grill when we were kids, flipping pancakes and arguing about who got the last strip of bacon. Now had become a man who stole from his own staff's pockets. Dad would have been heartbroken. Mark found me at the cart. He showed up on a Friday dressed in a suit that had seen better years, hair gone mostly gray. He waited in my 15-deep line for a breakfast burrito and a coffee. He ate on a bench nearby, watching me work. Watching Sophia refill napkins and remember people's orders without looking. When the line thinned, he approached the cart again. Mr. Lewis, I said, wiping my hands on my apron. Call me Mark, he replied. He glanced back toward Rafa's. Your father's place has been harder to recognize lately. I said nothing. This, he added, holding up his half-eaten burrito, tastes like the food that made me invest in your father 20 years ago. He let that hang in the air for a second. I fired Damien as manager, he continued. Hell, keep a small ownership stake. Lawyers are lawyers, but he has no more say in operations, finances, or suppliers. We're bringing in an outside manager temporarily. But long term, He brushed crumbs from his hand and looked me dead in the eye. I want to restore the place to what it was, he said. And I can't do that without someone who actually knows how Rafa ran his kitchen. So I'm asking, would you be interested in a partnership? My heart hammered against my ribs. Part of me wanted to shout yes, to march back into my father's kitchen through the back door and feel the old tile under my feet. But when I glanced over my shoulder at the turquoise cart at Sophia, wiping down the counter and chatting with Ray about his dog, another part of me tightened protectively. This cart was ours, built from nothing but a tax refund, an old notebook, and a retired man's faith. I need time, I said, to think, to run numbers, to talk with my daughter. I can't just give this up. He nodded, as if had expected that. I'm not asking you to give it up, he said. I'm asking you to find a way to grow both. He handed me a card. The offer's open, he said. Whatever you decide, thank you for telling the truth. That night, I laid it all out at our small kitchen table. Not just for myself, for Sophia. On one side of a scrap notebook, I wrote, "Stay cart only." On the other, "Partner with Mark." We added pros and cons. Cart only. Freedom time. With Sophia, lower overhead, closer to the community. Partnership. More income, more stability, a chance to reclaim Dad's legacy, but also more responsibility, less control risk of getting lost in someone else's system again. Sophia listened, chin in her hands. "Would you be gone more?" she asked. "Probably," I said. "Restaurants are long hours. I might be at the grill for dinner service instead of home." She thought for a long moment. "I like our mornings," she said quietly. "The way you know everyone's name, the way people tell you their stories. It feels like Grandpa's stories when Head talk about feeding people. I don't want to lose that." Neither did I. Later, after she went to bed, I stared at the two columns and realized there might be a third option. What if I didn't have to choose? What if I could treat Rafis like another client instead of a boss? The next day, I called Mark. What if I said instead of me running the restaurant full-time, I came on as a consultant? I train your kitchen staff in Dad's recipes and structure. We differentiate menus, so we're not cannibalizing each other. You focus on dine-in dinners and special events. I keep my cart focused on breakfast and lunch. Different price points, different niche, same heart. There was a pause. "I was hoping you'd say something like that," he admitted. "I don't want to chain you to a stove if you've already built something that works. I want your brain and your hands when you can spare them." We hashed out details with Angela at the table, legal language turning my simple idea into a structured consulting agreement. 2 mornings a week, I'd be in the restaurant kitchen at dawn, training staff on Dad's methods. The rest of the time, I'd be out with the cart, feeding construction workers and nurses and office folks. In exchange, I'd get a consulting fee. And, if things went well over 6 months, an option to buy a small ownership stake in the business. I signed my name on the line with a hand that didn't feel like it belonged to the guy who used to fold towels for minimum wage. I felt like a man stepping into the role he was meant to have had from the start. Walking through the back door of Rafis for the first time in 2 years almost knocked the air out of me. The kitchen looked both familiar and wrong. Familiar shelves, familiar grill, familiar walk-in, wrong jars, wrong labels, wrong shortcuts. Staff looked up when I walked in. Some I recognized, some were new. Clara stood by the prep table, eyes already shiny. "Welcome home," she whispered, then promptly started crying. We hugged for a long time in front of the walk-in, both of us smelling like onions and dish soap. "I'm sorry," she blurted, "for staying, for not speaking up sooner, for letting him." I squeezed her shoulders. "We all survived the way we knew how," I said. "What matters is what we do now." Then I put on an apron, set Dad's notebook on the counter, and got to work. We started with salsa. "Tomatoes go on the grill first," I told the cooks. "No canned anything. You want blistered skin, charred edges. Peppers next. Then onions and garlic. You're not just making a condiment, you're making the base note of everything." We roasted, we blended, we tasted. One of the older cooks, Miguel FEUD, started under Dad, took 1 spoonful, and closed his eyes. "Dios," he whispered. "That's it. That's what we lost." We did the same with beans, with marinades, with rice, bringing back small, patient steps that Damien had sacrificed on the altar of speed. Within 3 weeks, regulars began to notice. "This tastes like before," one woman told Clara at the register. "I stopped coming because something was off. I'm glad it's back." A local food blogger, Olivia, who turned out to be Mark and Rebecca's daughter, showed up at both the restaurant and my cart with a notebook. She tried a breakfast burrito at my cart, then Dad's chile verde at the restaurant. She took notes, asked questions about spices and history. Her review dropped the following Wednesday. "Rafa's Corner Grill. A return to roots," the headline read. In the article, she wrote about how the restaurant had lost its way in recent years, prioritizing profits over quality, but under new culinary direction, it was tasting like her childhood again. She also wrote about my cart. Danis Morning Fix is the kind of place you hope never gets bought out, a turquoise island of honest food and conversation under a strip mall sky. Business exploded. Rafa's dinner reservations doubled within a month. My cart's line stretched so long at lunchtime that Marco joked about putting in a ticket machine like at the DMV. For the first time, instead of splitting the same small pool of customers, it felt like we were drawing a bigger circle around the neighborhood. Damien did not take any of this well. Had been removed from management, but he still lived 10 minutes away. Bitter, embarrassed, and angry. He tried to show up at the restaurant once during one of my training sessions. Mark and security turned him away at the door. He sent me 3 long texts, rants about betrayal, about me turning everyone against him, about stealing his inheritance. Angela copied them into my file and told me not to respond. The night he finally snapped, I was serving dinner specials from the cart in Ray's parking lot, trying out a new carne asada sandwich to see if it might become a permanent item. We had about 20 people milling around. Kids tossing a ball, someone's dog sniffing at a dropped piece of tortilla. Damien's SUV pulled up so fast it nearly hit the curb. He stumbled out, clearly drunk. His shirt was wrinkled, hair a mess. "This is all your fault," he shouted, weaving through the customers. "I built that place up and you slithered in and took it from me." "Sir, you need to calm down," Ray said, stepping between him and the cart. Damien shoved a napkin holder off the counter. Little packets scattered like confetti. "Look at you," he sneered, pretending to be dad, feeding these people like some kind of hero. "You're nothing. You fold towels and sell breakfast burritos in a parking lot." Sophia was standing beside me, eyes wide. "Go inside, Mija," I murmured. She backed up toward Ray's office. "Damien," I said, keeping my voice as even as I could. "Go home. We can talk when you're sober." "I don't want to talk," he snarled. "I want you gone." He lunged toward the grill. 3 men, Marco, Ray, and another regular, grabbed him before he could knock anything else over. "Police are on their way," Ray said, already on the phone. Damien thrashed and cursed until the sirens approached. The officers separated him from the crowd, asked a few brief questions, then escorted him to the patrol car. As they pushed his head down, he shouted, "This isn't over, Danny! You don't get to win!" I stood there, hands shaking, the smell of burnt onions in the air, and realized something heavy and sad. There was no version of this where we won together. The best I could hope for now was to protect what Eid built and keep my daughter safe from the blast radius of his self-destruction. Angela filed for a temporary restraining order the next morning. With the incident reports and witness statements, the judge signed it without much argument. Damien was barred from coming within 100 yards of my cart or the commissary for 6 months, with a hearing to decide on a permanent order later. I walked out of the courthouse with the papers in my hand, feeling both relieved and devastated. The boy who'd once shared bunk beds and comic books with me was now someone the law needed to keep away from my child. 6 months later, the restaurant won a Best Family Dining Award from the local business association. Mark insisted I stand on stage with him and Clara to accept it. Sweaty hands, too tight tie stage lights in my face. In his speech, Mark talked about returning to our roots, about honoring founder Raphael's legacy by feeding the neighborhood with integrity. When he said his son Daniel has brought that spirit back into our kitchen, I had to glance down so people wouldn't see my eyes glisten. Sophia sat at a table near the front, swinging her legs, grinning so wide it looked like it hurt. "See?" she whispered when I sat back down. "Grandpa would be proud." Later that year, Mark and Rebecca called me back into that same conference room where Id once watched my inheritance evaporate. Only this time, there was no smug brother, no surprise signatures. Just a simple contract offering me 12% ownership of Rafas in exchange for ongoing recipe development and staff training. "Your cart is still yours," Rebecca said. "We want your voice in big decisions. You earned that." Angela combed through the agreement, made a few tweaks and nodded. "This is solid," she said. "They're treating you like a partner, not a token." I signed. It wasn't the 50% I should have had by birthright, but it was a stake it earned with my own burned fingers, endless mornings, and one stubborn turquoise cart. Opportunities kept popping up after that. The elementary school called asking if I'd do a heritage cooking demonstration for their cultural day. I brought portable burners to the cafeteria and taught 30 kids how to make simple quesadillas while telling stories about my grandmother grinding spices on a stone in her backyard. Sophia handed out samples like a pro. Parents started asking if I'd consider weekend family cooking classes. Luis let me use a spare corner of the commissary on Sunday afternoons. We started with one class, 10 families, $60 a head, ingredients included. We made empanadas one week, breakfast tacos, the next salsa, from scratch after that. Kids got their hands messy, learned to slice tomatoes with dull knives and close supervision, and left saying things like, "I didn't know garlic started like that." The money was nice. The feeling of passing on Dad's lessons was better. A regional wholesaler approached me about bottling my salsa after eating at both the cart and the restaurant for months. I only agreed after Angela negotiated a contract that let me control the recipe and cut production if they tried to cheap out. Seeing jars of Rafa's fire-roasted salsa by Daniel Ruiz on the shelves of 3 local grocery stores made something deep in my chest finally unclench. Dad's handwriting had made it out of that battered notebook and into strangers' kitchens. As for Damien, he finished a court-mandated rehab program. His therapist reached out to Angela, asking if I'd consider a mediated meeting. At first, I said no. Then I thought about boundaries, about how I wanted to answer Sophia someday, when she asked if her uncle had ever tried to fix things. We met in a beige office with a round table and terrible art on the walls. He looked thinner, sober, older. "I'm not here to ask for anything," he said, voice shaking. I need to say I'm sorry. For the will. For closing the door on you and Sophia. For trying to crush your business. For making Dad's place into something he wouldn't have recognized." He talked about fear. About watching Dad favor my interest in the kitchen and feeling left out. About convincing himself he deserved it more because he understood money. About telling himself I didn't take things seriously so he wouldn't have to face that maybe he was the one who'd lost the plot. The therapist watched us both quietly, only stepping in to nudge the conversation away from blame and toward responsibility. When he finished, he looked at me with eyes I barely recognized from our childhood. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said. "I just needed you to know I'm not proud of any of it." Part of me wanted to stay angry. Anger had fueled those 3 a.m. prep sessions. It had gotten me through health inspections, legal threats, and long days. But sitting there, I could see what Dad might have seen. A son who'd been terrified of not measuring up and had grabbed power the only way he knew how. "I accept your apology," I said finally. "That doesn't mean I trust you. That will take years, if it ever comes back at all. The restraining order stays. You stay away from my kid and my businesses. You get to rebuild your life somewhere else." He nodded. "That's fair," he said. He asked if he could send Sophia a birthday card through me. No visit, no promises, just words. I agreed with conditions. The card arrived 3 weeks later. It was simple. No excuses, no guilt. Just, "I'm proud of the way you help your dad. I'm sorry I wasn't better when you were little. I hope your day is full of good food and people who love you." Sophia read it twice, then tucked it into the back of Dad's notebook. "I'm still mad at him," she said. "But I guess people can learn." "Sometimes," I said. A year after Damien shouted, "You are finished," at me in a parking lot, I pulled up to Ray's shop for the lunch rush and froze. The line stretched a block. Marco was at the front, holding up his phone like proof had been there since 11:15. Nurses still in scrubs, teachers, mechanics, vet techs, parents from my cooking class. Sophia stood behind the counter of the turquoise cart, the paint chipped in places, but still bright, calling out orders by name. "Extra salsa for Mr. Carter. No onions for Mrs. Lee. Miss Alvarez, I saved your favorite table." I fired up the grill, sprinkled cumin and paprika over meat the way Dad had shown me, and felt this quiet, fierce gratitude settle over me. My brother had stolen a building and tried to erase me from our own story. But in the end, he couldn't touch the part that mattered. The way people closed their eyes at the first bite of something that tasted like home. The way my daughter moved through the crowd like she belonged. The way the neighborhood chose with their feet and their wallets where Rafa's legacy really lived now. It wasn't perfect. Some scars, legal, emotional, and otherwise, would never fully fade. But standing there at my turquoise cart with a steak in the restaurant my father built and a line of neighbors waiting for food made from his notebook, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't finished. I was just getting started.